Great. Thanks, Cassie. Great to be on a call with so many familiar names and faces. Are folks able to hear me all right?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, and everybody can see the screen that I'm sharing here. It says stormwater up the top.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so the city of Clive this year will be on its way to, I believe it's our fourth consecutive year running a soil quality restoration cost share program. Um, the program itself, as Cassie mentioned, for Clive, came about first in its first year because we were successful in getting a very generous Urban Water Quality Initiative grant from IDALTS, which we appreciate. It has been absolutely essential to getting us to where we are today. But we've evolved the program since then to really make sure that annually we can knock this out. We can get a good number of yards treated, and we can make this a sustainable program, even if we don't have grant dollars year over year. Cassie asked me to give some special attention to the way that we built an audience around this practice and consistently have enough people interested to make the investment worthwhile. And I can tell you that it's a great hook. It's a great storytelling hook in Clive when we can go and tell people that there's a practice that's going to make their yard more beautiful and more resilient and also create all of these wonderful benefits in places that we love, like the Clive Greenbelt, which is where all the stormwater in Clive goes, one way or another. So I'll start by taking you through a few of the website pages that we've built around our program. But while we're going through it, I'm going to talk about some of the other communications platforms we used to get to the good place that we're at today. So first off, like a lot of cities, we have a stormwater page. This is part of our MS4 compliance. It's part of just in general letting people know about sort of the infrastructure side of the utility. This page is has a lot of overlap with some other things that the Public Works Department does, but also some overlap with things that are going on with public safety, as with flooding, with stream bank erosion, and with MS4. That gets us into some of our work with our ComDev department. So a lot of different teams coming together here. But the one that I want to point you to is this whole idea of how do we best manage stormwater at home. That brings us to this page where we lift up a number of ways that we are trying to communicate with our neighbors, businesses, about what things that they can do to implement good water resources practices, to be great water resources stewards in Clive. So you see information about our tree program, you see stuff here about our stormwater assistance program. We see a lot of similarity between all of these things, SQR being the third. We break SQR out separately now because that has been sort of our first program that we got started. We did that before we started our grant and our annual tree sale. And so we've built up so much equity sort of in its standalone program there that while, yes, people can do SQR as a component of a bigger grant award, potentially, we still like the way that this cost share program works for Clive. And then you get to this page here. So annually, our communications around the program, it's safe to say it's at least annually a 10-month program, but we're always open. We are always adding more and more people who hear about the program to our waiting list. Right now, going into sort of the busier time of activating the program for targeting September applications, or September installations, we've got about 150 households, over 150 households right now that said that they're interested in the program for this calendar year. We'll be able to accomplish about 80 a year, but this year we're going to try. We have some extra dollars we can put into it, so we might bump up to about 110 to be able to that we will get done. All of them are getting done in the month of September, and that was a really important lesson learned from a storytelling point for Clive. A lot of folks wanted to overseed as part of this, and in our first year, we paid cost shared both the seed and the compost and the decompaction costs. In every year since then, we've decided just to say that we're going to be there to do the decompaction and the compost. But if you want to do seed on top of that overseeding, then you should work with our contractor or your own preferred contractor to get that work done. That's been a really good fit for us. What does that have to do with the communications calendar? We found that so many people wanted to do seed that they wanted to get it done in that fall germination sort of window when there still was a growing period. We haven't seen the cold temperatures yet. What that ultimately kind of led us to a realization is that If you're going to get that mid window hit, you don't want to get going in August when it's still real hot. And if you get into October too late, it's going to be too cold. So that's why we really try and put all of the installation work into September. Then we walk backwards from that, where we're going to be awarding a contract in July because a lot of our communications to our participants is going to be in August about getting their yard ready to go. And then back into the previous months before that too, we have to communicate about sort of our process for how you secure your spot. You secure your spot once you received your quote, and then you send us a payment, and then you're on the list to get ready for us. And that work is happening largely in June and July. In April, in the spring months, and May, the months we're in right now, that's where we're really pushing the opportunity. The website here is our central hub for all the information, the basics of getting yourself signed up. We just use a simple email address with a shared inbox for folks to indicate their interest and get added to the list. And from a promoting the program standpoint, most of our storytelling there is done through our city newsletter. So we're still kind of old school in Clive. We have a lot of folks who like to get a paper newsletter. It's 4 pages. We send it out every month with utility bills, and we've built huge equity up in that tool. And I think it's been absolutely essential to our success, keeping people informed about the opportunity. We can actually map when people are asking to be added to the list just based on when we send those utility bills out and when the newsletters hit. There's one other really valuable tool, though, that we've used, and that has been just yard signs. So when we go out and do the applications, there are a lot of folks who still don't understand what they're seeing when they see a bunch of compost all over these yards, covering up what they perceive as, healthy green turf. And so they'll start asking people. So we made it real easy on our side for people to sort of, in effect, ask their neighbor what's going on here. And it was actually, I think, Cassie who created this sign. Sign simply says, "What's going on here? Soil quality restoration." And then we put a picture of a sort of treated versus an untreated yard, and then a QR code that people could snap, which takes them directly to this website. One other piece I want to lift up here that's been really important. You can get people initially interested, but then converting them from their interest into sending in their payment, that takes a lot of sort of customer communications once they've already sort of think about it, they're already in the store. Now we need to get them to say, all right, now I'm going to buy it. These videos that we do every year with basics of what to expect, how you get your yard ready, what are some other things you might not be thinking of that you should before you commit to doing this. These have been really valuable. And my colleague, Julia McGuire, just using a Zoom platform now, records those. We'll host a virtual meeting with folks every summer when they're sort of initially interested. These are the types of things that go from that initial sort of hook to, all right, now we got them and they're going to participate, that have been really valuable to Clive. And with that, I'll pass it off to our next presenter.
Thanks, Pete. Does anyone have any questions for Pete in the city of Clive at this point before we move on? Feel free to type it in the chat. All right, seeing none. Dave, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Can you hear me and see my screen okay?
Yep, looks good. Still need to put in presenter mode though.
How about that?
Yep, looks good.
All right. Well, thanks, Pete. Cassie asked me to kind of cover, we emulated Clive's program a couple of years ago. And one of the things that we really tried to look at was how do we streamline the process for someone who's interested in finding out how much it might cost for them to do the program and express their interest to the city. And so we used a GIS tool, and that's what I'm going to focus my comments on. We have, as I'm sure most cities do, a stormwater utility in Johnston. And as part of that, we have mapping of all the impervious surfaces on each property in Johnston. And so we knew sort of, and this is just kind of showing that, where on properties we've got roofs and parking lots and driveways and those kind of things. And that's how we bill for our stormwater utility. And so as we got talking about doing the SQR program, we really kind of put our heads together and talked about, is there a way to sort of inverse that data? Can we look at what's left on a property that might need soil quality restoration done on it? And so we built a GIS tool. This just kind of shows an example property where we're showing the green area. I would note here as an example, most people would like their right-of-way done. So obviously we're not calculating the area in the right-of-way. And so this wasn't perfect, but we created a tool here where we could look at total parcel area, total area where there could potentially be soil quality restoration. This was just an early rendition, and then use that tool to provide an estimate of how much a project would cost and how much would be the homeowner's responsibility. And our program was a 50% match up to $1,500 per property. And I was hoping I'd be able to actually pull up the tool and show you all of the things that it did. Unfortunately, there were enough links. Links had broken since we had used it, that it was going to take too much of an effort to get it up and running. But I've got some screenshots here that kind of show you how it worked. Essentially, that data that I just showed you on the previous slide was preloaded into all properties. And so a property owner could come in, plug in their address, and this estimate tool would pop up. It would show that area. As you can see here, they had the option to estimate a polygon. So they could draw, if I'd say a property owner just wanted to do a portion of their backyard, they could draw a polygon around that area and calculate it. They could also remove an area from the estimate. So if they decided, hey, I've got a garden boxes in the back, I don't want that area, they could add polygons, and those areas could be removed. And they could also then, as I mentioned, the right-of-way, if they wanted their parking area done, they could add those polygons as well. Once they drew all those polygons, it would estimate the square footage on their property. We estimated high. Our estimate was 24 cents a square foot, and it would give them a calculation of, if you have this many square feet, you can get a grant up to this amount, and here's the amount that it would cost you to do that. And if they were interested after seeing that quote, all they had to simply do was fill out their name, address, phone information, and click submit. And then staff was notified with all of their information, including the mapping and estimate that they created themselves. And so this was a really handy tool for those property owners that were maybe interested and just really didn't know for sure until they had a better idea of sort of what the cost might be. Once we had all that information submitted, we held on to it, kept it in a database, and then we bid out the project. Actually came in a much more favorable cost at 16 cents a square foot. Then we went back and calculated actual estimates based on that 16 cents a square foot, and sent out the quotes to each of the property owners to determine if they were still interested in to get them officially signed up for the program. And get their payment made. The handy thing about this, a couple of things. One, these maps then were provided both to the property owner and to the contractor. So when the contractor went out on every individual property, they had a detailed map like this showing the areas where they should and should not treat for stormwater quality. And this one's pretty clear where they've got a shed. Looks like they wanted the area under their swing set done, and so that's included. There's maybe some landscaping in the back that they didn't want done, a patio they didn't obviously want done. But this was really helpful both to the property owners and to the contractor, so there was no sort of debate on what area should or should not be treated. The second really big benefit to staff was, and from a time perspective, we did not have to go out because of this and field verify and field measure each property owner. That saved us a tremendous amount of time from a field perspective. Obviously, even with the tool, we got a lot of phone calls, a lot of inquiries, emails, etc., asking questions. But this really kept our time in the field leading up to the program getting kicked off to a minimum. As far as outcomes, we completed over, it ended up being 2 construction seasons, 209 properties, and over 50 acres, and almost just over $350,000 of total investment as a result. And I would say the tool itself was really instrumental in getting people interested, getting them a very clear understanding of what that cost might be, and really, as I said, kept our investment in time to a minimum as we were leading up to calculating those estimates and getting the contractor going. So with that, I will pause there and I'd be happy to answer any questions that there might be.
Thanks, Dave. Does anyone have any questions for the City of Johnston's program before we turn it over to Keith with Des Moines?
Yep. This is Patrick B. with City of Des Moines.
Hi.
Hello. On the previous slide, Dave, you had kind of your cost breakdown of 165,000 from the city and grants and 190 from private. If they're doing a 50-50 split, where did the extra funding from private come from? I'm curious.
We had a lot of properties that exceeded the $1,500 grant square footage. Larger areas, we worked with a couple of townhome associations where they were limited to how much they could get per home, and then they did a much bigger area. And so we had a couple of bigger users that really drove up those extra costs.
Are you looking at continuing this?
Not in depth. We had
The grant, yeah.
we had a WQI grant that really funded this. I think there would be interest in doing a smaller version. I would say we did, and was interesting to hear Pete's take on 80 is enough in a season. I would say that was one of our lessons learned, is we were trying to bite off too much at one time. One small contractor, and once you get behind and those kind of things, it's tough. So I'd say we will probably look at it again in the future, just because of how strong the interest was. But we're going to take a minute to take a breath, and and then everybody's still eligible under our normal homeowner grant program. So if they wanted to do it on their own, they're able to do that. They just don't get the benefit of the buying in bulk.
Yeah.
So,
Are you continuing yours, Pete?
Yeah, that's something that because we saw so much success after the first year, we decided, let's see what it would take to operationalize this. So 3 big things it took. One, the reliable funding source. We decided annually we're going to kick in $50,000 from our water utility to cover our portion of the cost share. And then 2, we needed to make sure we had learned more about sort of the process to be able to make sure we had something that we could lift every single year. So those points that Dave made around saving time by not having to go out and physically measure every yard or verify every yard measurement, rely on your GIS stuff. That's a great example of where we had to first learn where those process efficiencies lived so that we could then quickly implement them. And then the third thing, we had to have a person that we could give this to say, you are the bottom line person to do it. The first years we did it, we were very much indebted to our friends at Polk County, Cassie and John. Had they not been with us, we couldn't have executed it. But now we've got it to a place where one person, supported then by me and a couple other folks, really can take on the program and still manage their other responsibilities.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions before we finish up with Des Moines? All right, Keith, floor is yours.
All right. You see that okay?
Looks good.
So my name is Keith Hubbard. I'm an engineer with the Clean Water Program in the City of Des Moines. I'm going to talk through our experience of doing the batch and build project, kind of walk you through step by step of how we did it and what the outcomes were. So last year we were awarded a water quality initiative grant from IDOLS for $100,000. So for the project, we had the $100,000 from the grant, and then also the $100,000 that the city matched. Something a little different with our project is that instead of opening up to the entire city, we focus on a few priority watersheds. And then instead of having a cost share, it was 100% free for the homeowners. So the watersheds that we chose were in the northwest side of town, kind of the Beaverdale area. They're called priority watersheds. Basically, after the 2018 storm event, we had come through the metro area that dumped a lot of rain on everybody. We saw there was a need for some areas that had flooding issues, where there maybe wasn't adequate storm sewer and not a good plan to be able to address those problems. So the Public Works Director is able to designate areas as a priority watershed that have flooding or water quality concerns. And what this provides those watersheds is we have a normal stormwater BMP subsidy program that pays or reimburses 50% for things like rain gardens, rain barrels, SQR. If you're within one of the priority watersheds, you're actually eligible for 100% reimbursement. Just try to kind of spur more private practices being installed within those watersheds that have known issues. So in this case, for our project, we chose 5 of the watersheds. There's a total of 125 acres and 607 properties. So as we're planning for the project, we used an estimate of 20 cents per square foot. And based on that, we would have to have about half of the properties sign on to this project to make it work. So the way we did that is we sent out postcards to everybody. It explained, that they're eligible for this free program, kind of explained what it was, had a QR code they could scan to apply, or there's a website you can go to get more information, and there's a link to the application on there as well. We also held a virtual meeting ahead of time just to give people a chance to ask questions and find out more about the program. So let's walk through the timeline of our project. So we started everything last year in April. That's when we sent out all the postcards. And then the plan was to do the installations in the fall. So sent out the postcards in April. And after a week, we had 50 applications come in. So we're off to a great start. But then 2 weeks later, pretty much nothing. It just flatlined. No more applications were coming in. And we need to get to 285 applications based on our estimate. So what we did is we decided to actually go door to door and just knocking on the remaining 550 properties. We had a couple of interns at the time, so they helped. We had office staff going out, knocking. We even did a Saturday knocking on doors, and we had a flyer that we took with us. If nobody was home, we left the flyer at the door. If they were home, we explained the program to them. We had iPads that we could sign them up right there on the spot as well. It's kind of interesting. A lot of the people that I talked to, at least, they didn't remember ever seeing the postcard, or my guess is they just thought it was junk mail and threw it away. Other people thought it was too good to be true. I mean, what in life is free nowadays? So they thought it was a scam. But after 3 weeks of door knocking, we gained an additional 160 properties for a total of about 217. That still wasn't quite to 285. So we did 2 more weeks of door-to-door knocking, but only got about 10. So at that point, we're kind of stuck at 228. We had our bids come in at that time, and we had been estimating 20 cents a square foot. The bid came in at 12 cents a square foot. So now we needed 485 properties. There's no way we're going to be able to do that with this small of a watershed. So at that point, this basically became a 2-phase project, and we're just going to focus on phase 1 for now. During the next month or so, our legal department had put together an agreement for the property owners to sign. There's a 4-page agreement and right of access, temporary easement basically to get on the property. So we had to get all those put together to get those mailed out. We still got a few more applications trickled in, but we got a pretty good response with the applications. You can see there still was a gap between the number of applications, the number of agreements that we had gotten back. And at that point, the installations had actually started in September. So we continued to receive agreements and applications. There's a kind of uptick in the number of applications we got. I think as people saw these going in their neighborhood, they maybe had renewed interest in it. But We had some trouble getting people to send the agreements back. I had to keep sending reminder emails and a couple upticks from that. And at the end, some people had lost the agreement. So we were doing hand deliveries, getting things signed at the last minute. We did hear, you can see there's a gap of about 36 people who just never sent their agreements back. Some of the people responded they didn't want to sign it, they didn't like the legal document, and others we don't know. They just lost interest in the program. So at the end of phase one last fall, we had 227 installations. We used slightly less than half of the funding that we had available, and we decided to do phase two this spring. So we actually just wrapped up phase two. Yesterday was the last installation that was done. And so we had funding for about 190 properties on this one. And this time we went a lot bigger. We kind of learned our lesson from having too small an area, where now we went really large. The green area there, those are 4 of the 5 priority watersheds from phase one. And you can see the yellow outline, it's significantly bigger, a lot more people in that one to draw from. And so we mailed out postcards to everybody again, and we needed about 190, and we got 190 applications in just 2 days. And we kept the period open for a little bit, and we had a total of 536 people apply. And during the whole thing, we tried to make it completely clear that funding was limited. Even though you're applying, you're not guaranteed a spot in the program. But we basically took those 536 applications and broke them up into 3 different pots. The first pot is people we're going to send the agreements to right away. The second pot is kind of a wait list because we anticipated not everybody sending the agreements back. So we want to have kind of a reserve. And then the remaining applicants, we directed them towards our regular rebate program. Something interesting too, phase one, the response rate for the postcards is about 8% of the people, and phase two is about 11%. So if you're ever doing something like this, we're sending postcards out, maybe a rule of thumb is 10% of the people might actually respond to the postcards. So here's a map showing the locations of everything that was installed. The green dots on the north side, those are phase one. They're all tightly clustered together. And the yellow dots that are more spread out, that's phase two. So phase one, with them being so tightly clustered together, the contractor could work through those pretty quickly. We allowed him to stockpile compost in the street. And if he had a bunch of properties right there in a line, he could get through those pretty quickly. At the peak, he was getting through sometimes over 20 in one day. The second phase, though, they're a lot more spread out. We didn't do the compost in the street this time. We had a central stockpile location where that green star is, and he had to load up compost onto a trailer and haul it to each property, and they're a lot more spread out. And on those, he struggled to get through even just 10 a day. So just kind of an overview of the entire process that we took. So we sent postcards out to everybody, had an online application to go on there and fill everything in. As we got the applications in, we went into GIS and measured the properties by hand. We didn't have the fancy tools to do it necessarily. I do it more by hand. So that took a little bit of time. Once we had a list of properties, we knew how many square feet we're looking at. We sent the agreements out to everybody. And as we received those in, that's when we went back out in the field and verified the measurements with our maps. Once we had the verified measurements, put the properties and the square footage and estimated compost quantities in an Excel sheet that we shared with the contractor. And then they use that as their working list to go off of for which properties to install. The city remained the main point of contact during the entire project. So we sent out all the emails with the dates for installations. We're the main point of contact for questions that people had. This kind of freed up the contractor. He was a smaller business. The owner actually ran the aerator during the whole project. So this freed him up to do the installations, and then the city remained the main point of contact for the whole project. So the contractor would go out, do the installations, and then the next day we'd go out and we'd just inspect each one and make sure everything was okay. Some of the challenges that we had, definitely a big challenge was the watershed size for the first phase. It was too small, we found out. Found that out the hard way. Second one is just getting people to sign up for the applications. We sent the postcard out, and a lot of people didn't respond to it, but another issue we had is as we're going door to door, we found out there's a lot of elderly people that lived in these neighborhoods, and They didn't have access to the internet or email or anything. We did have some people call in to fill out the application, but we may have missed quite a few people just because of technology. Then also just getting the agreements mailed back, that was a challenge. We were chasing people down to the last minute sometimes to get those turned back in. For the contractor, one of the challenges he had was access to yards. These were smaller properties. The average is only 3,500 square feet, and they had small backyards, small gates, and the aerator he had needed 50 inches of clearance to get through. A lot of these gates were a lot smaller than that. So in the first phase, he had to come back later with a smaller aerator to fit in the backyards. For the second phase, he actually took a second aerator, the small one, with him everywhere he went, so he could get easy access into the backyards to do those. So like I said, we just finished up installations of the spring one just yesterday. One of the challenges we had, so in the fall, weather was great. I don't really remember any rain delays or anything, but the spring, off and on rain. If it rains one day, he might not be able to work again for another couple of days, just getting the compost to dry out and the yards being soft. So that caused a few delays. We had some people get delayed a few times. They weren't too happy about that, but overall it went pretty smoothly. Then the other issue is just where to stockpile the compost. In phase one, we didn't have a really good centralized place, so that's why we allowed them to do it in the street. And here's a few pictures. The left two pictures are from phase one. The right two pictures are from phase two. So in phase one, we allowed to go in the street. Ideally, it was going to be on side streets, and he's only going to stockpile as much compost as he needed for the day. That didn't always work out. Sometimes compost is left over. So we had him put cones up, and we tried to protect the inlets the best we could. They had a third-party delivery, delivering the compost. And so a couple times it got put into a busy street, which was an issue. Once we had to actually go down a storm drain, so we had to clean that out. But in a situation where everything is close together, like in phase one, that's really sped everything up. The compost is right there, and all the properties were basically on the same street. So you could just use the skid loader to load up the buggies and just drive it down to the next house. One funny thing is we have a picture from a resident that somebody had driven up there with their minivan and some Rubbermaid containers and started shoveling compost in the back. So yes, it was free compost for some people too. In the right two pictures for phase two, he had the centralized compost stockpile. Then he had that trailer on the right. He'd have to load up the trailer, drive that to each individual property, shovel it out by hand into the buggies, which took a lot more time. The nice thing with that one is that the road stayed clean. They're able to just use a leaf blower to blow any compost up off the pavement. With the first one, as soon as the compost pile was gone, we had to send a street sweeper out there just to clean up the pavement. So for the total outcome between the two phases, we had 416 properties that we treated, almost 1.7 million square feet, about 38 acres. And this really accelerated our SQR installations. Up until this time, our stormwater BMP program has been in place for about 8 years. And citywide in that whole time, we've done 109 SQR installations. So this is almost 4 times the amount that we've done in the past 8 years. And then for the priority watersheds, the intention was to try to spur more installations on private property. And that's been in place for 6 years. And we've only had 25 people take advantage of that. So this was a way to really focus in on those areas that were designated as priority watersheds to try to get as many of those installations in that area as we could. This is also a good tool to promote our BMP program. Whenever we did the installations, we sprinkled signs around different properties, just with a link to our regular rebate program. And also, like I said, we had a bunch of extra applications for the second phase, and we steered those towards our rebate program. And I think we saw an uptick in the number of applications from those two. And then everybody I've heard from so far has been happy. They're excited to be selected for the project. They were happy with the contractor, the work they did. They're excited about the results we're going to see. We had just a couple people who maybe didn't quite understand what they're signing up for. But once we explained everything after it's already installed, we explained it to them a little better, and they're happy with that. So from the city standpoint, I think we're happy with the results, and looking forward to see the results that people see out in their yards. And that is all I have. If anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Keith. If you have any questions, feel free to type them or you can unmute yourself as well. I also wanted to share in the chat, I have a link to the SQR Batch and Build Handbook that Polk County created in partnership with our cities last year or the year before. And there's a lot of good tips in there on how to get started, as well as clearly defined roles between cities and contractors and homeowners. It's a great place to get a lot of questions answered. But I really appreciate all three of our speakers today because you have all helped us learn and grow and adapt with doing soil quality restoration at this scale. So does anyone have any questions?
Cassie, this is Ann Sita. I had a question for Keith. My question was, what was the criteria used to set the boundaries or the watershed for phase 2?
So the phase 2 watershed, we had a stormwater master plan that we did a couple years ago and identified priority watersheds that have issues. And so that was the highest one on the list. That's why we did that one next. The smaller priority watersheds were kind of a case by case basis. This was based off of a citywide master plan that we had done.
Thank you.
All right, Keith. How could we automate the program so that we don't have as much in-field verification?
Having a GIS tool like Johnston would be very nice. If we do this again, maybe we can get one of those too. We had a lot of labor, a lot of man hours going out there measuring things by hand. So,
yep, I'd second that. That's if there's one big obstacle to overcome first if you're trying to operationalize this year over year, you got to use that GIS capacity.
I'll chime in though and say that maybe for the first few yards, it is nice to get staff out there in the field and seeing how it's done correctly and identifying any issues that can be addressed early on before the contractor really gets going, because they can go really fast.
Yeah, great point, Cassie. That once the actual applications are done, there's a good moment there for verification. That's also when we would drop off our signs and ask if they could put that up there. So we would already want to be out there to continue our storytelling work. While we're there, it's pretty easy once you've trained somebody up to go and tell them to go and see, well, this looks right, or they need to come back and do something else.
So I've got a question. It's really great to see all the things that have happened with these programs and all the things you've learned. And, one of the things we kind of talk about with this is just the kind of high risk, high reward. And you can see the rewards here because you're implementing so many more. I wonder if each of you have something that you were overcoming, or something, if somebody is looking to do this, that they would, that they should know if they're going to follow the model and the green booklet that was put together to do this somewhere else. Any good tips?
I would say don't be afraid to ask other communities that have done this already. I asked both Clive and Johnston for advice as we were first getting started, and even the first phase was still a little rocky. Even with that help, the second phase we did was a lot more streamlined just from experience. But if you can draw from other people, it's a big help.
Yep. Other things that we learned, there's going to be a certain amount of casework that comes up when you're working in people's yards. Somebody's going to bump into something, fence is going to get damaged, and so forth. So make sure that when you think about the total time investment and resource investment that you're signing up for, carve out some extra time there to do that casework management. And it's also one of those where we're typically dealing with, because of the scale that we're working at, we're dealing with folks landscapers who've done this type of stuff before. So those cases aren't a big surprise for them. However, making sure they understand what the city's expectation is, I guess, and the way they're going to treat the residents, that we have high quality expectations, we have high customer service expectations, and that you're going to be working with us on a single contract, but that contract will not be done if we've got a bunch of casework out there that's still pending or not resolved in a satisfactory way for us. And so we haven't had any contractors push back on any of that. They want to give good results to their customers too. But the communication of expectations early on has been valuable to us.
Any feedback from the contractors you've worked with as far as how they like this method?
So we've been real fortunate. We've had really good contractors every year we've done this. The contractors who already have got some of the machination, the machinery to do this with efficiently, what we've heard from them is that, yeah, if they didn't have enough of the buggies, if they didn't have some of the hauling capacity, if they didn't have an established place where they could stockpile the compost, then they would have been, I think, very much in a pinch. So on our very first year, we had a contractor who was a little bit smaller. They had some gear, but they recognized pretty early on in the applications that it would be really beneficial to gear up even more so that they could get through enough properties in the right amount of time. Since then, we've been dealing with contractors who already have everything they need on hand. So much so that we represent to them that we want to try and do 80 yards in just the month of September in Clive. And when we went back to them earlier this spring to say, hey, could you handle another 30? And they said, no problem. So I'm not sure if they'll be the successful bidder this year, but they will, I know, come after the opportunity.
Yeah, we've only worked with one contractor so far, and he was a small business. So he had to rent a lot of his equipment. That was a little bit of a challenge. There was one time he went to pick up the compost buggies, and the guy before didn't return them. So, that's when you're smaller like that, have all the additional stuff. Maybe some delays here and there, but I think he's pretty happy with working with the city and with doing that project. It was a lot of good work for him for a couple of seasons.
Mm-hmm. One thing that we've found too is that once the contractors got somebody lined up, that communicating when they're going to be there, that's a really important point in this process, because obviously that's when the work gets done. But these yards, the people who participate, they have a lot of care for their yards. You're going to be working in their front yards too. And so the contractor says, hey, I'm going to be there in 2 days, but then they're not. That can create some heartburn for folks, we found. So one thing we really needed to emphasize with our contractors is that you need to communicate frequently, have a strategy in place to communicate in a timely way with everybody who's going to be participating in the program. A lot of times the city is still the backstop on that, and then we can make another phone call. It's helped us a lot to have contractors who utilize a texting service for scheduling this stuff and then communicating when they'd be coming out or if there's any type of change. That seems like a communication method that a lot of our participants have enjoyed.
And from our project, the city did all the communicating. So we'd send out the emails with the installation dates. And every day at 3:00, I check with the contractor, hey, are there any delays for today? If there was, I send out the email before I left for the day. Hey, you're delayed another day, sorry, for your priority for the next day. So that really helped a lot of people, I think, stay in the loop.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I will echo, as someone that helped with a lot of these programs, that this program, if you choose to do it with your city, it's kind of an everyday thing. You can't really let a day go by without checking in on it. Otherwise, something could happen that could put you really far behind. And also, there are a few expectations of each homeowner to prepare their yard before the contractor arrives. And so that's the importance of them getting a proper heads up for the contractor to get there so that they have everything mowed, they picked up their dog poop, they have your utilities marked, that sort of thing. And so if that's delayed for any reason, then that can screw up the process along the road.
So I'm curious with the cities that have done this, how many bidders did you get typically when you're bidding it out? And does it seem like we're getting more of these type of contractors able or willing to do this type of work?
In Johnston, we had 3. 2 for sure.
Same in Clive. We've been between 2 and 4 each year. Sorry, Keith, I talked over you there.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think we had 3 or 5. I can't remember for sure, but it wasn't I know it wasn't more than 5, maybe like 3.
Did any community experience a shortage of compost, or was it always readily available?
When I talked to our contractor this weekend, or before the weekend, I asked him to make sure he had enough compost to do the work. And he's getting his compost from Metro Waste. And I guess there's a 5 cubic yard limit on the compost. And so he had to call to make sure that he was able to get more. But he never had any issues getting the compost that he needed.
Yeah, and in Johnston, we had put the feeler out to Metro Waste to make sure they had the capacity before we started. And then the contractor that was successful also had a private source they were purchasing it from. So we did not have any issues as well either.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. We did let Metro Waste know ahead of time that this was coming their way.
Yep. I'd say Metro's been a really great partner in all of this for Clive, and I think it sounds like with the other communities as well. And if your city is an investor or one of the 2080 members of Metro Waste, then they've done a nice job offering a pretty competitive price for our cubic yards compared to what we would find on the private market. It's just a matter of then communicating early enough so that they can reserve appropriate amounts and then use whatever they aren't going to sell that way to do their Grow Gold program, their bagged compost program. They've really ramped up their capacity. In our first or second year, we were a little bit nervous about the capacity that Metro would have because I think they had a fire in one of their piles that set them back for a while. But they're really seem to be humming now and can produce quite a bit of compost. There have been some other private companies that have come on board since. And so it'll be interesting to see whether they want to try and get in the game of working with cities when we are going to be using so much in a short amount of time, if they want to try and sell at competitive prices. I feel, just given that we're a city in NWA, that we've got a strong preference for that, where we feel like we're most likely going to get a better price from them. But there's also just sometimes the fun synergy of being able to tell residents that after we have those big windstorms in May and June, and we have all this debris that we've collected and maybe even need to do special collections, well, all of that now has gone out and has been cooked up into this great compost that's coming back to your yard just in a little different form. So there's some fun synergy in all that.
All right. Any final questions or any last thoughts from our speakers?
I do have one last thought. I think that as a group of cities here in central Iowa, that we have really quickly developed some sophistication around how we do this well. And it's leading to, I think, a good response in the private market too, not only among customers who think that this would be a fun thing to do, but among contractors who can get the work done. And so as a challenge to our region, I know tides are tight with the dollars, right? But this is really, we've built some really good stories here, some really positive stuff, and we should keep utilizing that energy now to see if we can operationalize annual SQR cost shares in more and more communities. Like I said, Clive will be doing year 4 this September, and I'll be touching base with our council again at strategic planning in August just to make sure that they're still on board, because they want to make sure that there is a real return on investment here. SQR and its efficacy over time, I think, varies a little bit. But when we've been doing the math in Clive over 4 years, we think that we were able to improve over 2.1 million square feet of turf, and that with that, our estimate then applying some assumptions about the quality of soil quality restoration, we think that means we can handle 655,000 gallons of rain infiltrated per rainfall event over a half inch. So that's the kind of thing that really does change a curve number if you do it with enough volume and consistency. These are the kinds of practices that can really change a landscape, make it better able to catch and infiltrate stormwater, and have it perform even in an urban setting much more like it did during in its undeveloped state. So I'd encourage everybody to keep pressing ahead if you can.
Absolutely. Thanks. Okay, everyone. Thanks so much for the great conversation and for all of the tips from our speakers. Once again, I recorded this. I'm going to put it on the Rain Campaign YouTube page. If you can't find that, please just email me and I'll be happy to email you the direct link. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.